last 2 months, this is obviously not the most ideal way to hold debates, but civic engagement is more critical than ever. The measures we approve this month will either help or hinder our region recover and hopefully thrive in the wake of the coronavirus epidemic. That is why City Club has shifted all of our electoral programming online to be free and accessible to all. Thank you in advance for your patience with the technical difficulties we will almost inevitably encounter. City Club is an organization that has been dependent on ticketed revenue for a long time. But in this all new, all digital world, we're having to take a different approach. So I'm asking you to donate today. If every viewer gave $5, we would reach our goal and be able to continue offering free programming to help democracy flourish. Donate now by texting Support City Club to 44321. That's Support City Club, one word, to 44321. I also want to encourage folks to engage in the conversation online as if we were all in a room together. Send us your questions and comments online by emailing us at questions@pdxcityclub.org or engage with us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook using @PDXCityClub and or the hashtag CityClubDebate. You can also, of course, use the YouTube comment section. Whether you ask a question, share a link with a friend, or just watch the debate to get informed, all of us at City Club want to thank you for participating today. Thanks also to our sponsors, SEIU 49 and The Standard, in addition to our amazing media partners, X-Ray FM and KGW. Also, as this is our last election program for the primary cycle, I want to thank the amazing people who have made all these online events possible over the last 2 months. While you mostly see those of us moderating the program, in reality, we have the easy job. Behind the scenes, Stacey Rice, Erin Haley, Julia Meyer, along with David Krug, put together incredible work to pull off this incredible feat. So many thanks to all of them. While today is the last election-related program of the season, it's not the last City Club event. I hope you'll join us next week for our annual gala City Feast, which, like everything else right now, is now online. Tune in May 14th at 6 p.m. to help democracy thrive. Thanks to everyone who has tuned in. If you missed one of our previous debates, you can watch it and get all of City Club's election coverage and information on our upcoming virtual gala on our website, pdxcityclub.org. Into today's program, it's going to be a two-part discussion on ballot measures 26209 and 26210. We'll begin with ballot measure 26209. Each speaker will get 2 minutes to offer an opening explanation of their position. Then we will ask 4 pre-prepared questions that each speaker will get 90 seconds to respond to. If I think a rebuttal is warranted, I'll offer one and give the speaker 30 seconds to respond, and I'll keep track of time to make sure both sides get equal speaking time. The 5th question will be broken into 2 parts. Each speaker will get a chance to ask the other one a question with a 1-minute answer. We'll then have 10 minutes of public questions, and we'll do it all again for measure 26210. The candidates can see our timekeeper, who will give them warning signals when they're just about done, and then when it is time to conclude. All of the candidates we've hosted over the last 2 months have been just amazingly respectful of the time and their colleagues, and I have no doubt that today's speakers will continue that trend, though both the timekeeper and I will be here to help remind them if needed. So let's get started. We'll begin with ballot measure 26209, as I said. Here to represent the yes position is Jennifer Rollins, co-chair of Fixing Our Streets Oversight Committee. Rollins also chaired City Club's 2015 Research Committee on funding Portland's streets. Here to represent the no position is Eric Fruits, Vice President of Research at Cascade Policy Institute. As a consulting economist, Eric has produced numerous research studies involving economic analysis, financial modeling, and statistical analysis, and as an expert witness, he's provided testimony in state, federal, and international courts. Welcome, Jennifer and Eric. So according to the voters' pamphlet statement, ballot measure 26209 poses the question, shall Portland renew a 4-year 10 cents per gallon fuel tax for maintenance, described as paving and potholes, and safety, described as crossing, lighting, and sidewalks? So we will start with Jennifer. You have 2 minutes to outline your position, beginning whenever you're ready.
Thanks so much, Colin. It's really exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking to be here. Just about 5 years ago today, I stood up in front of City Club, posher digs than my kitchen table in the Sentinel Hotel in one of the ballrooms to present the City Club's research report on funding Portland streets. And that report really broke the logjam. There had been decades of false starts and discussions of street fees and utility payments and just getting nowhere. I know one of the people we talked to was Earl Blumenauer, who in the 80s, when he was on Portland City Council, was trying to figure out a way to get some funds to maintain streets. So we're talking about decades of underfunding and not maintaining Portland's infrastructure. As a result of that report and City Club and all the advocacy work that it did, the Portland City Council referred a measure to the voters, and it passed in 2016 to establish this 10-cent gas tax. Portland joined dozens of other Oregon cities with a gas tax. We're not alone. And there's a reason that cities have to have these fees. Transportation funding from the federal and state governments hasn't kept up with inflation. And it's just a smart thing to do. It's cheaper if we maintain our streets now than if we continue to let them fall into disrepair. It's just like owning a house. You don't wait to do maintenance on your roof until the ceiling's caved in and you have mold in your house. It's cheaper if you do basic maintenance up front and take care of your assets. And that's what this is meant to address. The burden on the average resident is low. It's probably a couple dollars a month, depending on how much you drive. And it's a great investment to help maintain the streets and keep them safer for everyone in Portland. So that's why I would encourage everyone to vote yes.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Eric, you will now get 2 minutes to outline your opposition to the measure. And whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's face it, Portland streets are a mess. By the city's last estimates, Portland has a road paving backlog of about 3,100 lane miles. So that's enough to pave a 2-lane road from Pioneer Square to El Paso, Texas. A survey conducted by Metro for the regional government found that about 75% of likely voters say congestion is a serious problem. In contrast, only about a third said that pedestrian and bicycle safety is a serious problem. Over the years, Portland has taken money from road maintenance to spend on light rail and streetcars. For example, in 2009, the year Portland committed $30 million to the Milwaukee Light Rail project. The city also eliminated paving projects on local streets. And even though we have those self-inflicted wounds, now Measure 26209 is looking to raise about $75 million in gas tax revenues for the next 4 years to fund what Portland calls their Fix Our Streets program. Except very few streets will actually be repaired. The list of proposed projects shows paving projects for only about 7 miles of city streets, and that's less than 1% of the current backlog. Proponents also claim sidewalk repair is a key area of the gas tax spending, but again, the list of proposed projects identifies a total of only 1 mile of sidewalk repairs. A fundamental principle of public finance is that there should be a close connection between the services provided and the funding source. And this is actually embodied in the Oregon Constitution, which mandates that fuel taxes be used exclusively for construction, reconstruction, improvement, repair, maintenance, and operation of public highways, roads, streets, and rest areas. If you look at the breakdown of spending under Measure 26209, many of the projects are actually designed to increase congestion and make things worse for drivers, the people who are actually paying the tax. You've got $4.5 million for neighborhood greenways, which are streets with low traffic and are designed to give bicycles, pedestrians, and what they call neighbors priority. Let's face it, we do have a congestion crisis. Gas tax money should, and the Constitution says it must, be used to build and maintain roads.
Thank you, Eric.
And the measure doesn't.
Thank you very much. We'll definitely have more time to dive into the specifics of that. Just to flag, we are living in this wacky world where our personal lives and our professional lives are totally integrating and running into each other. And there's only so much we can do to keep them separate. That said, the more that we can manage background noise for this presentation, the better I think it'll help folks hear you both. So we just offer that. As we dive in, our first question is really, when this measure was first conceptualized, we were living in a different world. It's now clear that COVID-19 will have far-reaching impacts on health, the environment, transportation, the economy, and the region's tax base. To what extent does COVID-19 change the case for this measure, and will our approach to maintaining our streets need to change? We'll start with Jennifer with 90 seconds.
Obviously, we have to take into account the effects that COVID-19 is having on our economy, and they're devastating. But I think that just makes the case for this measure stronger. I think that a gas tax will have less effect on people who are struggling because they won't be commuting to work, so they'll be paying less. And on the flip side, these PBOT projects are providing great paying, skilled jobs for people who really need them. You know, when I walk down the street now, I can see people from PBOT hard at work on fixing our streets, one projects right now when unemployment is skyrocketing. So I think it's even more important to support this than it was 2 months ago.
Thank you very much. Eric, to what extent does COVID-19 change the case for the measure, and will our approach to street maintenance need to change?
Well, one of the problems with the gas tax is it is probably one of the most regressive taxes you can have out there because you have that lower income people tend to drive further to work. They tend to drive older cars that are not as fuel efficient. And we're also noticing now with the latest data coming out that COVID-19 is actually disproportionately affecting low income workers more than any others. So with the gas tax, they will be spending a bigger share of what little income they have on a gas tax. And that's money that could be freed up. You know, I look around the country, I talk to my family in the Midwest, and their gas prices are below $2 a gallon. Here, we're still hovering around $3. And it's not, part of it's because of our unique situation, but it's also because of all the taxes that we levy on that. And again, it's one of the most regressive taxes. It's a regressive tax that hits at a time when people need cash in their own pockets more than the government needs the money in their pockets, especially to do brand new projects.
Thank you very much. This is, as I said at the beginning, a renewal measure. So what have Portlanders gotten for the last 4 years of investment? And does that warrant continued investment? We'll switch it around this time. We'll start with Eric.
Well, you know, I'm not actually opposed to a gas tax in principle because I think that a gas tax is one of the more effective ways of raising money for road repairs. My challenge with this measure and the last one, the renewal that we're renewing, is that it just doesn't do what it says it's going to do. The whole plan is to fix our streets, and only half the money is used to actually fix our streets. The whole point of the gas tax is to improve roads for the people who are paying the tax and to benefit the drivers who are paying the tax. And it doesn't do that. The money gets shifted off into other areas that are unrelated to actual road maintenance, and even worse, are designed to make congestion and driving worse for drivers. It's part of what a lot of people think of as the metro region's war on cars.
Thank you. Jennifer, what do you think Portlanders have gotten for the last 4 years of investment, and does that warrant continued investment?
I think you're going to find this is the one place where Eric and I just really disagree. We have a lot of areas of agreement here today, and I respect a lot of his points of view, but I have to say that this is one tax where Portlanders got exactly what was promised. This isn't a measure where there's some new tax and it gets funneled off into new programs. There's a list of projects that are going to be completed, and we'll probably get into the audit findings later. They got off to a slow start, but before this 4-year period is over, every one of those projects will have broken ground and they will all be delivered as promised. Voters can go through and take a checkbox and see what was in the ballot initiative and what's been done and will be finished, and they can check off everything on that list. They've gotten exactly what was in the measure.
If I can actually spend a second to agree with Jennifer, one of the upsides of this measure is that it does identify the projects and how the money is intended to be spent. And that's a huge contrast with the Metro measure that we'll be talking about later, where there is no itemized listing of how the money is going to be spent. And so I do have to hand that they do have an itemized list of how they're going to spend money.
Thank you both. So as Jennifer foreshadowed, in 2019, the Portland City Auditor Office performed an audit of the gas tax that was passed in 2016. It showed that many projects were behind schedule, heavy vehicle owners weren't paying their share, the city was not providing annual program audits, and it was difficult to determine if PBOT had maintained the spending split of 56 street funds for repair and 44% for safety projects. What has been done in response to the auditor's finding, and why should voters trust that there won't be continued and similar issues? We'll start with Jennifer.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think the audit was a fair one. It was disappointing to me. I have been involved, as I mentioned from the start, and I got some egg on my face. I was running the committee, and the audit didn't find that it was being super effective or transparent. But I think in response, that both PBOT and the Oversight Committee have made a lot of changes, and PBOT has made a commitment going forward to have an outside auditor every year audit the program and report to voters. And the committee gets much more frequent and much simpler and easier to understand information. And I think that all of the audit concerns have been addressed. The 56-44 split was kind of an awkward construct. It kind of goes to Eric's point of, what's for maintenance, what's for safety. And that's not a part of this upcoming measure. It gives a little bit more flexibility, but you can imagine there's lots of things that could be characterized one way or another. And it was really hard to make sure, 56 is a really precise number. So I think this new Fixing Our Streets ballot measure addresses that issue and will make it a better process for everybody.
Thank you very much. So, Eric, what do you think has been done in response to the auditor's findings that is insufficient, and why should voters trust that there won't be continued issues?
Well, I think the audit itself is a real testament to the importance of having independent audits, and independent audits that focus also on performance. That's something we see lacking in a lot of our government oversight. I appreciate the fact that they have made changes onto the program, although PBOT's excuse for why they had so many shortcomings was that this is a new program that they've had no experience with. This is PBOT, right? That they do, roads are their job, and to say that, oh, this is brand new and we've never done road projects before is a bit disingenuous. And so I do appreciate the fact that they have tried to make those corrections, but those were things that did not need to be corrected in the first place. In other words, they should know what they are doing. If your job is to build roads, you should be able to build roads, and you should know how to budget these things. And that's the other thing. You get a lot of these projects that go way over budget and are, they are overpromised and underdelivered. And I think we really need to start holding people accountable for that.
Jennifer, do you think there's been sufficient accountability? Like, how would you respond to sort of the issues that Eric is raising?
I do think there's been, increased responsibility. I think that the audits, which, Eric acknowledges will be an improvement, are a great step. I think that, it makes a good point about PBOT being able to make good forecasts, but this is something that's been brand new to Portland, and it was a huge increase, a new program. And frankly, I, didn't know how to be a chair of an oversight committee. So there were a lot of growing pains. And I think that, some of the negative findings were valid, but I think that they've been addressed, and I don't have any reservations in supporting this going forward.
Thank you. So back in 2015, it was estimated that over $100 million a year was needed to address Portland's street maintenance backlog. And a City Club report on the topic found that a 10-cent gas tax is almost certainly insufficient to really address that backlog. To what extent will another 4 years of this gas tax really get Portlanders noticeably improved streets? We'll start with Eric.
Well, I think it is a small amount of money, and I think what they should have done when they created their project list was triage it based on bang for the buck. In other words, where are we going to get the best improvements in the roads? Where are we going to potentially reduce congestion at bottlenecks? I think that there's a huge amount of misplaced priorities on issues that are designed to actually slow traffic. Remember, in the Portland region, the average commute has increased by 12% over the past 5 years. That's about 20 hours a year that we are now losing just sitting in our cars trying to get to and from work. It has a real cost. It's not free or painless to be sitting in your car trying to get to and from work. And that's where, good government is about services delivered, and they should have delivered services to actually make Oregonians and Portlanders' lives better rather than worse.
Thank you. And Jennifer, to what extent do you think another 4 years of this gas tax will really get Portlanders noticeably improved streets?
You know, I think it's a tough question to answer. Street maintenance is something that you don't really notice if it's happening appropriately. I think that what 4 more years will get is, like you said, and Eric acknowledged, a drop in the buckets. But if we spend, you know, make a concerted effort and do the preventive maintenance, you know, you and I might not notice a big difference in the streets outside our house, but we've saved our kids and our grandchildren exponential amounts of money by doing the maintenance now. It's like I said, if you clean out your gutters before they're seeping into your house, no one noticed that you have nice new gutters, but you've saved yourself a lot of heartache down the road. And that's all this is meant to do. You know, this is not enough money to address congestion. This is like fixing years and years and years of neglect, not making improvements in improving bottlenecks and all the things that are on Eric's wish list.
Absolutely. So I'm going off script just a little bit because I'm hearing actually a lot of alignment between the two of you, which is a little bit unusual sometimes in these forums.
That's because I like her.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're well aligned. And so I think what I'm curious about is just what would be is this the best measure in order to achieve sort of the laid out goals, right? Or what's the alternative? Like, and I think both of you, right? Eric, I'm curious, like, if this isn't the right solution, what would be a right solution?
Okay, well, I think a gas tax would be okay. I think it should be used exclusively for road and street maintenance. But we can't get away from the fact that it's not just neglect. It is a malfeasance. The city of Portland for years has disinvested. We have the money to fix our streets, but we took that money and we used it to build streetcars. We took our parking lot money and our parking meter money to build the streetcar. We spend $15 million a year subsidizing the streetcar. If the streetcar is such a wonderful piece of transportation, we should sell it to TriMet, let them run it, and free up $15 million a year to fix our streets. To say that, oh, this is just something that happened to us, it's completely false. It was a conscious decision to take money that was originally going to roads and using it for something else. When Sam Adams stopped street paving projects and Charlie Hale stopped street paving projects, they did it with the intention of making life worse for drivers. And so it's not an accident that happened to us. It's something that was imposed on us, and we should hold our politicians to account for that.
And Jennifer, do you think that's accurate? Like, is this sort of a misguided approach to solving a long-standing problem and there's something better out there? Or is this really the right and best strategy?
You know, I think it's an imperfect strategy, to be sure, but I don't think that we can ignore the problem. The city, regardless of what it's done in the past, and I would add paying for the Selwood Bridge to your list of topics that are, you know, things that maybe we shouldn't be paying for. That was what the additional registration fees that other cities have used to pave their streets has gone to in Multnomah County and Portland. So yeah, there have been lots of choices that maybe we can disagree with in the past, but the fact is the streets are crumbling, they haven't been maintained, and the city doesn't have a lot of tools at their disposal. The state laws limit what the city can do, and the beauty of this is that people can tell exactly where it's going. It's not going to go to build another light rail that Eric doesn't like or to maintain the streetcar. It's got to be used on that list of projects. And because it's a gas tax, it's got to be used on the streets. It can't end up in the general fund. So I think it's imperfect at best. I think gas tax is going to go away as we have, you know, more electric vehicles and more fuel efficient vehicles. So it's not perfect. It's not going to be the long-term solution, but I think it's the best we have right now. And I think it would be, you know, further irresponsible for us to ignore the chance to at least chip away at the backlog, regardless of how we got to this position.
Absolutely. Thank you. So as I foreshadowed at the beginning, we'll now give each of you an opportunity to ask the other a question. So just please be sure that your question is, in fact, a question. If you seem to be veering towards something more like a statement, I will jump in and help guide you back to the question asking path. As I often tell City Club members when I moderate forums, it's never a bad idea for your first or second sentence to end in a question mark. So we will start with Jennifer's question for Eric, which he'll have about 60 seconds to answer.
Well, Colin, you kind of stole my thunder with the last question where you went off script, but I think that's all right. I think my question is really, it seems to be that Eric and I have one area of disagreement, and that's that this gas tax can only be used for things that make things better for drivers because they're the ones paying this tax. And my question to him would be, what about my neighbor who doesn't have kids? Why should her taxes be going to support schools, or any of, a million other examples along those lines? I think this tax benefits everybody. So
Oh, that's a bad question. Yeah, that's a bad question to ask a libertarian, because part of me says your neighbor shouldn't be paying for your kids' schools. But the broader question is, just a fundamental principle of public finance book, and you'll see is that there should be this nexus between the what's being paid and the service that's being delivered. We often get away from that. For example, general income taxes. That's why we have general income taxes. But when you have taxes that are specified in the Constitution that the money goes to benefit the person who's paying it, then, my goodness, you probably should abide by that. And so, I would like to get away from more taxes and more user fees. It may come as a shock to a lot of people that I think congestion pricing is a good idea. I just have zero faith in the city of Portland or Metro to actually implement congestion pricing in a way that actually works.
Thank you. And feel free to flow right in. What's your question for Jennifer?
Oh, my question is less campaign related and more oversight related. And so my question, I don't know the answer, is, you as the oversight chair, what are you looking for in the next round of spending? What do you think needs to be changed or overseen more stringently?
Well, I think that there is going to be a much bigger challenge in the next round, because I suspect that this promised list of projects is not going to be fully funded because there's going to be a huge shortfall due to COVID-19. So I think the big challenge is going to be for the Oversight Committee to take a really hard look at the projects and try to maintain that balance, the promised balance between maintenance and safety, and stay true to the promises made to voters. But I think it's going to be a much rougher road going forward this time, and that's what I would be keeping an eye toward, making sure that that balance is maintained between the two categories in a time when we don't have enough money to do everything. The last round was easy because there was a surplus, and that's not going to be the case.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you both. For those just tuning in, this is City Club of Portland, coming to you with our virtual debate for the May 2020 ballot measures, with speakers Eric Fruitz, Juan Carlos Gonzalez, who will be joining us in just a bit, and Jennifer Rollins. I'm your moderator, Colin Jones, and we ask that you support City Club with a donation. Now is a great time to do that, but anytime. You can text support City Club, one word, support City Club, to 44321. That's 44321, and that will help us continue to bring this important election coverage. So we're now going to pivot a little bit and take questions or offer up some questions that have come in from the public on Measure 26209, the Portland gas tax and street repair. So I think one of the questions that just popped out at me from the list that we've gotten is, what would happen if this ballot measure doesn't get passed? Like, what's the impact of that? And so we'll start with Eric.
Well, the simple answer is there would be $75 million less for the city to spend, and there'd be $75 million more for the residents of the region to spend. A lot of times we think of just the one side of the equation, like, oh, wow, we're going to spend $75 million to fix our streets. Well, that $75 million comes from people. And right now, I think the households and the businesses in this region need that $75 million way more than our local and state governments need it. And so I think, one thing is that people are going to be just slightly poorer than they would be than if the tax didn't pass.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer, what do you think? What happens if this ballot measure doesn't pass?
Well, I think two things. I think one, the investments that we're making now won't be made in maintaining streets, and they'll cost more in 10 years when the streets are in poor condition. It's just a fact that maintaining when they're in better shape is cheaper than letting them fall into disrepair. And the other thing I would point out is that this program has done a really great job of contracting with COVID certified companies and providing great jobs to communities that may have fewer opportunities in this time frame. So while there is a cost to people, there's also a real benefit to providing those infrastructure jobs in an economic downturn.
Absolutely. So this question, it's very specific, but I think it speaks to a lot of Portlanders. And so it reads, I live in Lentz and there are potholes everywhere and bad sidewalks. Where has my money been going? And so could you each sort of speak to that sentiment and talk about, if we renew this tax, what neighborhoods are going to be prioritized, why, and why some people feel so left out? We'll start with Jennifer.
Yeah, it's a sentiment that I hear in my household a lot. I live in one of those parts of town where there are a lot of unimproved roads. So people are like, we don't even have paved streets. What's going on? So I'm certainly sympathetic to that. But the list of projects is made taking into account public inputs and like a lot of things in Portland now, a big equity lens, looking at making investments in communities that have been underspent on for a long time. And also making sure there's something for all parts of the city. I live in Southwest and we're getting a great improvement along Capitol Highway, both sidewalks and paving. And I think every neighborhood can find something for them, but I would just remind people that this is a drop in the bucket and there's no way that this is going to address every pothole. And I would urge people to support it and get your input into PBOT so that you can make the project list for more years from now when hopefully we pass it again and get some more of these things taken care of. But I'm sympathetic, I am. It's tough.
And Eric, sort of your thoughts about folks that just feel left behind.
Yeah, well, I think the potholes are a huge issue. There's a huge pothole down the street from me, and we actually had a 1-year birthday party for it a few months ago, baked a cake, and the cake fit in the pothole and still couldn't fill it. And that kind of gets back to the misplaced priorities. If you look at, we're only spending about half the money on road paving projects. If we took that money away from things like the greenways or the slow motion plans, we would have, about $35 million to fill potholes. That's a lot of potholes that can be filled. And you may joke about potholes as being, kind of trite, but if you look at how much damage there is done to vehicles because of potholes in the city, it is not trivial. And so it has a real impact. It's not the sexiest thing. You don't have a ribbon cutting or a birthday party to fill a pothole, but that's good government is about services delivered. And that's just one of the boring services that people expect their government to deliver. Not everything is a ribbon cutting event.
Absolutely. So we've gotten a couple of questions that sort of end up interweaving, and I'm going to try and integrate them to a single question, so bear with me. Basically, folks are asking, why aren't maintenance and road safety priorities just in the general fund budget? Why does this have to be a separate tax? Isn't there a way that we can improve the maintenance and safety of roads without a fuel tax? Eric?
Well, you can. And remember, the general fund is a general fund. You could do anything you want with it. For example, the city decides to spend $15 million of the general fund to subsidize the streetcar. The nice thing, the upside to having something like a gas tax is it is constitutionally limited to what you could spend it on. So when you are raising that money, that money is earmarked for streets and roads. We saw this with the parking garage and parking meter revenues. We were originally told that was going to be used to fix our roads. And instead, we decided to sweep that away, take it away from the roads, and put it into the fun, shiny object known as the streetcar. And so what's nice about gas tax revenues is you can't play that game. And so there is an upside to the gas tax. But they could spend the entire general fund on fixing roads if the city council wanted to. I'm not saying they should, but they can. They have a lot of leeway.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, sort of your thoughts. Why isn't this work a higher priority?
I think you're going to find this is one of those disappointing areas where Eric and I are in a lot of agreement. And when I approached this topic for the City Club, that's how I went into the research program, thinking, like, what the heck? Like, streets are a basic government function. Why can't they manage to pave the streets appropriately? This is ridiculous. But when you get into the details and you see, like Eric pointed out, what's happened with money that was intended for streets in the past has gone to other projects. And you look at what the general fund is funding, it's fire, police, and parks, and no one wants to cut funding for those things. Those are three things that Portlanders hold near and dear. So a gas tax, while imperfect and an extra expense for all of us, is assured to go toward our streets, and it's needed money. In a perfect world, maybe we wouldn't have it, but it's not a perfect world, and we've got to work with what we've got. And I think it's the best compromise that we've got.
Really. And just to be clear, at City Club, we're never sad to see folks on opposite sides of a position agreeing. That's always great. That's what we're working toward, right? How do we build those shared understanding? So we have one question, and we'll wrap up. The last question is pretty open, which is really what I'd like to hear is sort of, if we pass this, who wins and who loses, right? Every tax, every policy, there are winners and losers on both sides. And so using that as a framework, share your final thoughts about sort of what the sort of winners and losers of this particular policy are if we pass it. Let's start with you, Jennifer, and then Eric will close us out.
Sure. I think in one sense, everyone wins in that we're going to save ourselves money in the long run. I've said it, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but putting in a little investment now is going to save us 10 times or 100 times that money later. The losers, I think it's fair to point out, as many opponents have, that it is a regressive tax, and it's going to hit the people that can least afford it the hardest. That's the case with a lot of kinds of taxes that we have, and it's going to be the case of any kind of tax that the City Council has at its disposal to address this issue. So again, I'm coming back to my feeling that this is imperfect, but I think it's appropriate, it's timely, and it's needed, and I would urge everyone to support it.
Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, in terms of the losers, right, there is going to be a decline in some of the road paving projects, but, that's only 7 miles of road, so in fact, so there is going to be a loss, but the loss is so tiny. The gain is, of course, to the people who will have more money in their pockets. That money you save by not paying the gas tax is money you can use to buy food for your family, to buy shoes for your kids, to buy presents at Christmas. I tend to think that I am a much better judge at how to spend my money than a bunch of politicians or oversight committees, because when they get in the room, they decide to spend it on things with a lot of misplaced priorities. So I think that there's a small group of losers, and there's going to be a big group of winners if this measure fails. Thank
you very much. Really appreciate both of your perspectives on this. We are now going to pivot and talk about ballot measure 26210. So I want to thank Jennifer and then introduce Juan Carlos Gonzalez. Juan Carlos is a lifelong Oregonian, born in Forest Grove, raised in Cornelius, and now living in Hillsborough. In 2018, Juan Carlos was elected to serve District 4 on the Metro Council, representing Northern and Western Washington County. Here representing the no position is Eric Fruits, still the Vice President of Research at Cascade Policy Institute, and still a consulting economist. Eric has produced numerous research studies involving economic analysis, financial modeling, and statistical analysis. So thank you both for being here and for talking to us about this measure. So according to the voters pamphlet, ballot measure 26209 poses the question, should Metro support homeless services and tax income over $200,000 for a joint filing or $125,000 for a single filing, as well as taxing profits on businesses with income over $5 million. Starting us off, outlining his position against the measure is Eric Fruits. Oh, you want me to go first? Please.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, Carl Sagan once said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And the measure's proponents do make some extraordinary claims, but they provide no evidence, extraordinary or otherwise, to make those claims believable. At some point in the campaign, you'll hear the extraordinary claim, we know what works. It's just a matter of scale. Do we really know what works? Because I don't know, and I'm sure most of you don't know. We didn't know in 1987 when Bud Clark made national news with his 12-point plan. We didn't really know in 2005 when Portland passed a plan to actually end homelessness. And we certainly didn't know at the end of that 10 years when Mayor Charlie Hales declared a housing emergency. Somehow, between then and now, we all magically know with certainty what works. But apparently what works is a secret, because the measure doesn't say what's in that plan other than spending about $2.5 billion over the next 10 years. Is the answer really just spend more money? Willamette Week warned voters to look at the fine print of the measure, and then they pointed out that there is no fine print. There's no plan for collecting the money, no plan to deal with double taxation of small business, no plan for how the money will be spent, no plan for who will get it, and no specification of who will help. And there's no clear measures of success or failure. It's funded with 2 new income taxes, one on businesses and one on households. You'll probably hear the claim that only 6% of businesses will pay the tax. But think about your daily life. Almost every business you interact with is going to be hit with it. You've got the grocery, the electric company, the pharmacy, the gas station, PGE, Powell's, McMinimans, Pock, probably your own employer. The individual tax is even worse. Metro has no experience collecting a regional personal income tax, and the double taxation of business owners shows that they really have no idea what they're doing. And they say that only 10% of households will pay for this, but just you wait. Someday, sooner than you think, Metro will expand that tax further down the income ladder. It only takes 4 votes to do that.
Thank you, Eric. Juan Carlos, you have the floor. Give us your position for ballot measure 26210.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Colin. For the record, my name is Juan Carlos Gonzalez, and I serve as the Metro Deputy Council President, and I'm honored to speak on behalf of Metro Homeless Services Measure 26210. Measure 26210 is our region's opportunity to be bold and end our homelessness crisis that has been decades in the making due to disinvestment. We should not feel hopeless or helpless about homelessness, because in reality, proven solutions do exist. And Measure 26210 creates a reliable stream of service dollars to get people off the streets and into homes. Here's what we know. Between 2010 and 2018, rent prices increased 52% in Greater Portland. National data shows that rates of homelessness increased 13% with every 10% of rent increases. In 2018, the region approved the historic affordable housing bond to build over 3,900 affordable units, and we have over $1 billion in investment happening right now in the region. But we also need to match those capital dollars with flexible wraparound dollars to get people housed and ultimately stay housed. Measure 26210 will provide our region's experts the resources they need to offer services like case management, mental health care, addiction and recovery treatment, job training, housing assistance, and culturally specific services that are specific to each of the counties. I want to emphasize this measure was crafted to withstand the economy. It includes 2 taxes, a high income earners tax of 1% for households earning over $200,000 or individuals earning more than $125,000 a year, and a business profits tax for businesses earning over $5 million in revenue. And let me be very, very, very clear here. Only the top 10% of earners in the entire region fall into the personal income tax threshold in the region, and 94% of small businesses won't pay the tax. This measure was made so that those that have done well and continue to do well are helping address this crisis even during and after the pandemic. I want to wrap up my remarks by saying that now more than ever,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colin.
Sorry.
It's all good.
We're at time, but don't worry. You both, I know you have a lot to dig into, and we will get there as well. I do want to start similarly to the gas tax, which is, when Metro started talking about this, when service providers started organizing for it, different world, different context with sort of not living amid a pandemic. So to what extent do you think COVID-19 changes the case for this measure? And will our approach to housing services need to change? We'll start with Juan Carlos and then go to Eric.
All right, great. I get to kick this one off. I was about to say this, so I'm really glad that the question it kind of dovetails into what I was going to say. Is we really know right now more than ever, and that term feels like we're using it over and over again. But I think it's incredibly relevant to the situation that we face right now. That COVID-19 is shaking our region and our most vulnerable families to the core. Even before the coronavirus shut down our economy, Oregon was #1 in child homelessness in the country. On any given month, you have tens of thousands of families in Greater Portland that are a paycheck away from becoming homeless. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, this measure is about creating a tax system that can withstand the economy for those that are doing well, for families that are, or for households that are earning over $200,000 a year, and for 6% of the highest earning businesses in the region to pay their fair share and to make sure that our most vulnerable that are living on the streets, that are at risk of becoming homelessness, have an opportunity to get the services they need to stay housed.
Thank you very much. Your thoughts, Eric.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's going to happen with coronavirus, and we're seeing this already, is that people are incurring huge amounts of debt. The people who aren't paying their rents, the people who are putting off their mortgages, the people who are racking up their credit cards, even the payroll protection program is going to have to be repaid by a huge number of people. That is a massive debt overhang that will take years to clear out. Even if you are making high incomes, so-called, when the recovery begins, you will be spending a lot of that money to pay off the debts that you've incurred. There's an expression out there. They're called Henrys, high earners, not rich yet. You have people like lawyers and medical students who are still facing massive bills. They may have big paychecks, but a lot of that money goes out the door already. This is going to hammer people. You think it's 1%, you think it's tiny, but it's not. And remember, Metro loves your money. They will reach down further and further until they get the money they want. And right now it's capped at 125. Pretty soon it'll be 100, and then it'll be 75. Mark my words, it will happen.
Yeah, Colleen, can I respond to that real quick?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm going to firmly disagree with Dr. Fruits that we are not going to reduce the threshold. This measure was carefully crafted. It's a 10-year measure with a hard sunset. Any changes that go into the taxing mechanism will have to be made after those 10 years. We can't just do it in a backroom meeting or in a council meeting. And I also want to allude to the fact that Dr. Fruits quoted Willamette Week to look at the fine print, but they also encouraged voters to vote yes.
Thank you very much. So
just a quick follow-up on that, Juan Carlos and I, Councilor Gonzalez and I have been in a few of these, and I like him and I trust him. But the problem is he's one of 6 Metro councilors. And if you look at the makeup of the council and then look at the people who are running for council, he can make promises that they're not going to do that, but they can do that. And they likely will. There's going to be someone in there who says, we should raise more revenue from this. And there will be a lot of pressure, and maybe Councilor Gonzalez will vote against it, but that doesn't mean the other 6 will.
Absolutely. So clearly there's an area of disagreement about whether or not Metro will change this down the line. A lot of other issues at play as well. And so there's one of the questions that I think we're wondering about. There are already a number of programs that have been undertaken to address homelessness issues in recent years across the metro area. Why this measure? Like, why is this the right solution? So we'll start with Juan Carlos and then go to Eric.
Absolutely, Colin. What I think we can recognize is that the homelessness issue, the homelessness crisis has gotten significantly worse over the last decade. It is very visible no matter where you are in the region. When the 3 county chairs of Clackamas, Washington, and Multnomah County all came to the Metro Council, encouraged us to take on this framework, encouraged us to go onto the path of developing a regional solution for a regional issue, that's exactly when we knew we had to take this on. This measure will allow us to create a system very unique around the country. I've said it many times during our council work sessions and during our council meeting that this investment per capita will likely be one of the highest and most transformational than any other metro region in the country. I really do think that the voters, that people are hungry for a solution. We live in the wealthiest country in the history of the planet. And kids should not grow up thinking that it's normal to be homeless, that it's normal for our economy to be fundamentally broken and not be able to take care of one another. That is exactly why now is the time.
Eric, your thoughts?
Well, you mentioned that there were a lot of programs and a lot of years of programs. And what's fascinating about this and really telling is that there is absolutely nothing new about the Metro Measure. There's no new programs, no new ideas. The only solution that this measure seems to identify is we just need more money, and we need a lot of it. It's just about spend more, spend more, spend more. Remember, they say it's just a matter of scale. It's a matter of scale means it's a matter of just spending we just throw as much money as we can in it, and the problem will go away. And that's the real problem, because $250 million a year, we need to talk about, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax those 10%ers behind the tree. That is $250 million that is coming from someone, and that someone are the people in our communities. Everyone is going to pay that. If you think you are not going to be paying this tax, you are fooling yourself, because if you buy groceries or medicine or electricity, you will be paying this tax.
So as we look at this, one of the things that I'm hearing again and again as well is that, Eric, you have some real skepticism of Metro as the agency to manage this. And so, but intuitively, we think of housing as a regional issue. And so there's some logic to it. So what are your concerns about approaching this as a region-wide effort as opposed to sort of other more piecemeal approaches?
Well, this gets back to the history of Metro. The whole idea of Metro was to eliminate duplicative services. And instead, what they are doing is inserting a new layer in government. If you are, I talked to the city of Cornelius, if they wanted to do a program through the Metro Measure, they would have to come up with their own plan, send that off to Washington County. Washington County would have to send it off to the Metro Oversight Committee. Then Metro Council has to approve it. There's so many layers that you have to go through. And at each of those layers, you're spending resources, you're losing money, there's overhead and admin. I told Cornelius, if they want to do something for homeless in their area, they could do a local option levy. They would get the money next year, and they could start putting in services about 2 years before Metro can even get the money out the door. Metro actually makes things worse rather than better.
And Juan Carlos, why do you think a region-wide approach is the right solution, and why is Metro the right agency?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we can acknowledge that the history of homeless services, programs, et cetera, have really been concentrated in downtown Portland and Multnomah County. And we also recognize that homelessness exists in different ways in Clackamas County and Washington County. What we see is an opportunity to truly scale up our systems. On any given day, when it comes to a service provider, there are people that have to wait 2 to 10 years on a wait list to access housing or services, even if they are ready at that point in time. What we're facing right now is really an opportunity to step up and invest in those programs that we know exist, but again, have been historically underinvested in. That's what we're talking about right now. That's the question that we're facing about. Those that are doing the best in the region should truly be ensuring that people are taken care of. This measure is going to help with 5,000 people that are experiencing chronic homelessness and around 10,000 people that are at the risk of becoming homeless. And those numbers speak for themselves.
Thank you. And so, Eric alluded to this a little bit actually in our earlier session with the gas tax, which is kind of one of the challenges for some people about this measure is the lack of specificity, right? There's not as much sort of concreteness. And so we'll start with you, Juan Carlos. Like, what will define success as sort of concretely and specifically as possible? What are the hard goals of this measure, and how will we know that we've been successful?
Yeah, absolutely. We've gotten that question a lot, and I know that we're working with our county partners to truly create micro outcomes and macro outcomes as they pertain to jurisdictions. As I've mentioned before, each homelessness is an issue that is impacting each of the counties in the Portland metro area, and the measure will allow us to create local implementation strategies with those counties to ensure that the dollars are reaching the communities within the counties, whether it's Cornelius, Hillsborough, Beaverton, et cetera, to reach folks that need it. In terms of concrete outcomes, our federal system in serving our homeless community, our homeless population has been lacking and has been slow to adapt to the changing times. We have mechanisms that are imperfect. For example, I know that the Portland Business Alliance president, executive director Andrew Hone spoke at an OPB Talk Out Loud segment that the point in time count is really one of the few hard metrics that we have that we can use to measure, and our goal is going to be to bring that down as close to zero. But I also know that we're going to have the opportunity to firmly track people as they get housed, and make sure that people stay housed. We're going to see a visible outcome on our streets. But again, these things are going to be worked out very, very firmly and aggressively over the next 12 months once we pass the measure and we start developing those items in the local implementation strategy. And I see my time is up.
Thank you. Thank you. And Eric, do you think those are the right goals, and do you think we're going to be able to achieve them?
Well, I think we need to have some sort of measurement, and there's kind of the insiders measurement. Insiders measure things like, oh, how many people did we touch and serve and so forth. But if you ask the general public, what do you want to see? What results do you want to see? They'll say, I don't want to see people sleeping in my business's storefront. I don't want to see camps in my neighborhood. I don't want to have people rifling through my garbage in the middle of the night. I don't want to have my car broken into. These are, and you don't hear any of the proponents talking about how we're going to improve the quality of life, not just for the homeless, but for the whole community. The whole idea of this program supposedly would be to make the community better off. And so I want to see clear measures of how many camps are going to disappear. City of Portland counts camps. Can we get that to zero? Can we get people to stop sleeping in doorways? Can we get people out of the parks? Those are, to me, would be measures of success. If we can do that, if we can improve the quality of life so we don't have these massive spillovers from the homeless community into the rest of the community.
Absolutely, Colin. And just really quickly, I'll say that when you talk to the technical experts that work at the county that work on these things, those are exactly the goals that they talk to us about. And when they look to elected leaders to carry things and put them on the ballot, we're looking right now at a quantum leap forward to do something that has never been done before with regards to this issue. And it's about time that we step up.
Do you want to wrap anything on that, Eric?
Is this our closing statement? Or
no, just on that particular topic.
Well, I think that's one of the problems is there are no clear measures. Point in time may be it's an okay measure, and I've heard a lot of politicians say that they don't like the point in time count, but it's not a measure that's actually specified as a target to hit in the measure itself. It's just something that now Andrew Hone and the proponents are spitballing as a measure because they've been hammered so hard about not having any clear measures of success in the measure. And so I'm kind of shocked that they didn't come up. They had 2 years supposedly to come up with this, and they didn't.
Thank you. So I have some specific questions. I have a question for each of you that is related to things that have come up over the course of this conversation. So Juan Carlos, I think one of the things that have come up is that Metro doesn't have a lot of experience with this kind of tax and implementing it and managing it. And the first thing I thought when I heard that was, oh dear God, is this another arts tax? Like, am I going to have to separately calculate and remit and track this separate payment? So talk to me about that. Is that what we're looking at? Or like, what's the plan here for actually implementing this tax?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the question, Colin. This is something that the opposition has been vocal and critical about, not only looking at the cost of setting this up or administering it over the life of the program, but we feel very confident that we can manage this program efficiently and scale it up over time to meet the administrative requirements that we have internally as a goal. What I can say about our collection system is that we are as far into negotiations with with two entities as we can go before the measure passes. This will not be like the Portland art tax. We envision it to be, since it's two different mechanisms, we'll have an income tax component that we're going to format in a way where we ask employers to withhold those taxes, similar to the way that we pay our state income taxes, our federal income taxes, and we will structure the business profits tax the same way that Multnomah County has done, and the PBA has stressed that is one of the most clear-cut and clean profits taxes that they have to interact with at the local level.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Eric, I think the question that's come up for me is you've talked about sort of your concerns with this as a solution, and sort of it's untested and we don't know, we've been doing all this stuff. Like, what do you think we already have enough funding to address this as a problem? Is sort of the best solution to do nothing? Like, what's the alternative?
Well, I think there are a lot of misplaced priorities. You know, Bud Clark actually had a pretty good idea when he stated this 30 years ago. It was help those who want help, be firm with those who don't, and create an environment where businesses and people can flourish. And there are two components to it. There's the help those who want it and be firm with those who don't. Because the problem is, and this is the problem that the proponents have not really addressed, is the people who are most in need of care are those who are also the most resistant to care. The people with mental illness or substance use disorder, they just can't get it together to get the treatment they need. So how is Metro going to pull those people off the streets and get them the services that they so desperately need but don't necessarily want? And that is a big question that I don't think has been answered.
Colin, can I chime in a little bit?
Please.
Because I feel like it's unfair of Dr. Fruits to characterize, you know, a population in such a broad brush. You know, when we talk about serving people that want help and that need the help, you know, the truth is that on any given night we have 5,000 to 12,000 people experiencing homelessness in the region, and if those people want help, have to wait 2 to 10 years on a wait list to even get housing. And the time between when they ask for help and when they get the help it is very critical. This measure wants to close that gap, wants to help those people. And all right.
Thank you. Absolutely. So as we did for the last measure, we'll now give each of you an opportunity to ask the other a question. As a reminder, please make sure it is actually a question. And I'll nudge you a little bit if it starts to seem to be veering off course. We will start with a question from Juan Carlos for Eric. Go for it.
All right, Dr. Fruits, you know, we don't often get to ask each other questions. We just get to sit at the same table.
Yeah.
My question for you is, do you believe homelessness is a systemic issue? And if so, do you believe it merits a systemic response?
I don't know what you mean by systemic.
In terms of it's an issue that is not just isolated to one single factor or variable, or that one single jurisdiction can address.
Well, that's big. In that sense, yeah, it is systemic. But the thing is that it doesn't necessarily. I think the problem with Metro and their measure is that they're taking a boil the ocean approach. You know, we've got to completely help these people and spend $25,000 a year on them, when maybe there are smaller things that we can do to actually move the needle. For example, develop more emergency shelters. You know, it's shocking that no one in this whole debate has ever mentioned the work that's going on at Wapato, where you've had a program that went from nothing to almost up and running in less than a year. And they've been disdained, they've been mocked by county and city officials, and they're going to actually do some real work there, and they are not going to take a single penny of public money. And so I think that there are programs out there that can work, and I don't think you necessarily need an organization like Metro, who has no experience doing this, micromanaging it.
Thank you. And feel free to flow into your question for Juan Carlos.
My question. So supposedly this measure expires at the end of 10 years. Can you think of any reason why at the end of 10 years, Metro will not say, oh gosh, we need to renew this? Because you know they're going to ask to renew it already. This will be a permanent program. That's because it provides permanent housing, right?
There you go. Let him answer.
But by then you'll probably be governor.
Oh, well, I don't think so. Can I just make sure that you ask I understand the
The
question?
question is, what would make you at the end of 10 years say, yeah, we don't need to renew this?
You know, I can't speak for future councils. One of the major components of what this council wanted to achieve was a hard sunset. We wanted to make sure that we're able to build a program that is long-term and sustainable. And as you can imagine, there are many opinions. My opinion is this. You know, in 10 years, you're still going to have elderly people, people that are not working, that are on restricted income, Social Security, et cetera, that will still need help with rent, that will still need help staying housed. You know, people will continue to need help to exit homelessness. This is, like I said, a systemic issue. If we get to a point in our country where our federal government can invest the necessary and proper services that our local governments don't have to step up at that time, then I will be more than happy to advocate for a different measure, a small downsizing of the solution. But if we don't reach that, then I will be gladly here again in 10 years asking voters to reapprove it with a proud track record of the tens of thousands of families that we helped over the life of this measure.
Thank you very much. So for those of you just tuning in, this is City Club of Portland coming to you with our virtual debate on the May 2020 ballot measures with speakers Eric Fruits and Juan Carlos Gonzalez. I'm your moderator, Colin Jones, and part of my job here is to ask you to support City Club with a donation right now. You can do that by texting Support City Club to 44321 so that we can keep bringing you this important election coverage. So we're now going to pivot from our prepared questions and the questions that you had for each other to some of the questions that we have gotten from the public. So I want to start with, is there any research backing Metro's plan, or is there another city or region that has done this? There have been so many failed plans to solve the homelessness crisis. How do we know that this will help or work and not just cost a lot of money and not do a whole lot? We'll start with you, Juan Carlos.
Thanks, Colin. So the plan that we've created, that we've embedded, that was worked on, has multiple independent research agencies, a national agency, our local Eco Northwest in terms of assessing and analyzing. We often use the Veteran Affairs Department with the VASH program is a tremendous success example of almost functionally ending homelessness in the veteran community. In terms of other regions, we've seen Los Angeles County take a massive step, and I know that many leaders in the Portland metro area try to mirror those efforts in this measure. You know, what's different about our measure than I think most other regions, and you know, I can't speak for the entire history of the country. I can speak to the limited knowledge that I have right now, is that this investment is going to be, again, a quantum leap forward. It's going to be one of the largest investments per capita in addressing this crisis. I think we see the writings on the wall in other big metro areas on the West Coast of what a failure to act now is, and it's an opportunity for us to really do something about this issue.
Thank you. Eric, do you think there's research or other examples supporting this plan, or do we know if this is going to help work or hurt?
Well, this gets back to the idea of the bold claim that we know what works. Back in February, Ted Wheeler, the mayor, sponsored 4 big workshops throughout the city, attended by hundreds of people. And he was looking for answers to dealing with the homelessness problem. The subtext being he didn't have the answers. And now, somehow or another, 2 months later, we are told we know the answers with certainty. And to me, it's hubris to say that we now know with 100% certainty exactly what works, and all we need is $250 million a year to implement this thing. We haven't known what works for 30 years. We are all fumbling toward a solution. We're all trying to do better. But to claim that we know what works and all we have to do is just spend money to implement the plan, it's hubris. No one has implemented the plan on that scale. And just like Oregon is the only state that has a metro regional government for good reason, because it's a bad idea. We're the only state with UGPs, bad idea. We could be the only one with a massive regional homelessness program that doesn't work.
Can I chime in real quick? Well, first off,
yeah.
we're not the only region in the country with a regional government. We're the only region with an elected regional government. And, this measure, again, is about bold leadership trying to do something about this. What's the alternative? Not doing something, not stepping forward. When we have literally almost 100 people in Multnomah County and in the region dying on our streets from homelessness, one death is too much. And that's just not something that we can do in our watch. As for what other elected leaders have mentioned in terms of the solutions or not, the problem has always been the lack of funding to invest in the programs with very long wait lists.
Well, I want to speak to the bold leadership issue, because the story of this measure is that Here Together was out there and they were threatening to collect signatures to put it on the ballot, and that scared the Metro Council. And so Here Together grabbed Metro Council by the nose, pulled them in, and said, "You vote for this," because if you look at the governance and policy framework, it is actually literally written by Here Together. Here Together is the one that's leading this. Our elected leaders have totally abdicated their jobs as legislators and shifted all the work out to an unelected nonprofit that answers only to their own people, is not subject to public meetings, not subject to public records. That is shameful.
Thank you, Eric. So one of the other questions that have come up is the extent to which this plan, given that it is region-wide, will respond to local and municipal level needs. And so we'll start with you, Juan Carlos, how will services be nuanced based on local and neighborhood level needs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the beauty of our regional approach and the fact that, again, the 3 county chairs asked the Metro to create funding for local solutions at the regional scale is something that is really sensational, and it's significant in terms of what we can do for this issue. Because I know as an elected official at the regional level, I don't want to micromanage what we do. I do know that we need a regional solution and coordinated regional system. And actually, one of the goals of this measure and an outcome of this measure is going to be that we don't have 3 counties almost operating independently in a vacuum without ongoingly speaking to each other. I think one of the things that we have when it comes to local government is that there's a free flow of information or mind reading, where we're always knowing what our partners are doing across a jurisdictional boundary. This measure creates highly intentional spaces for our counties to talk to one another, to make our resources highly effective and highly efficient. And that's just a level of coordination that we haven't seen before. That's why we have over 150 organizations, business, community. We have we have dozens of elected leaders, community leaders endorsing this measure because they know that it's a right-sized approach for our region.
Thank you. And Eric, do you think that money is going to get from Metro to the local level and respond to those local needs?
Well, because of all the administrative overhead, from dribbling through Metro, through the counties, down to the cities, the nonprofit providers, you're going to get about 30 to 40% of the money is just going to disappear in overhead. Poof. And so that's money that's not going to help people. If you cut out one of those levels, you're going to save some money. But the other issue, too, is if you look at how the money's allocated, Multnomah County gets only about 45% of the funds. Multnomah County, according to the point-in-time count, has about 75% of the homeless population. And so there's a fundamental inequity where the region, the part of the region that has the highest concentration of homeless, gets a relatively small share of the money. Clackamas County actually, Washington County actually is going to be overcompensated relative to their share of the homeless population. They're getting a much bigger chunk of the money. And so to me, that speaks to this whole idea of a regional way of dealing with things. It's really a way of just transferring income from one part of the region into the other, and without necessarily thinking about the services, where the services are needed. Portland or Multnomah County needs about 75% of the services, but they're only getting about 45% of the money under this program. To me, that just seems bizarre.
Thank you. So I have one more focused question for you, and then I am going to give you each a minute at the end to offer some wrapping up statements because we've covered so much ground and there's so much involved in this measure. So my last sort of focused question, which is admittedly not even that focused, is kind of circling back to what we asked about the gas tax, which is what would happen if this ballot measure didn't pass? How much money are left in people's pockets? How much services don't happen? So what happens if we don't pass this measure? And we'll start with Eric this time.
Well, if this measure doesn't pass, voters and taxpayers can breathe a small sigh of relief, but not a very long sigh of relief, because coming in November, Metro is going to come at you with $3.8 billion with a B dollars in new taxes. So remember, this is just going to be a down payment on a massive amount of taxes. Metro may as well just live in your wallet by the time we're done with this year.
Right. And Juan Carlos, what would happen if this ballot measure doesn't pass?
Absolutely. Well, I think that we're going to be seeing more of what we're seeing now in our streets. As I mentioned earlier, we have 5,000 to 12,000 people in this region experiencing homelessness in Clackamas County, in Washington County, in Multnomah County. These people are our neighbors. We know that the data, the numbers, the visible crisis will only get worse. The COVID-19 crisis is also showing us and reminding us how fragile the economic stability is of a household, one paycheck away from potentially experiencing homelessness, whether it's couch surfing, sleeping in your car, et cetera. And we know that once people lose that stable home, it takes so much more effort and energy to get them back into a home. This measure is about comprehensive solutions to make sure that that people that are experiencing homelessness get the help, the services they need to access stable housing and to stay housed, and also to invest significant resources in families before they enter and become homeless. And I can't imagine the cost of waiting more. We see the issue now. We see how high it pulls in terms of people's priority. We see how hard elected officials get hit for not doing enough and not doing enough. Well, you know what? This is what we're proposing. This is what we believe to be the best solution. And I think we're going to see a lot of benefit from it.
Thank you. And we'll flow really right into, ask each of you to take about a minute, synthesize sort of your thoughts on this and make your case to voters. We'll start with you, Juan Carlos.
All right, great. I think for me, the most important takeaways from this measure is that this measure is taxing the families, the individuals, and the businesses that are doing the absolute best in this region, that are benefiting from this economy. And what we're doing is we're creating a revenue stream, a focused revenue stream to help the families that are on the other end of the economic spectrum that are not being served by this economy. What we see right now is an opportunity to serve the 5,000 to 12,000 chronically homeless individuals in this region, the over 50,000 households that are a single paycheck away from potentially experiencing homelessness. What we have is an opportunity to make Oregon not #1 in child homelessness in the country. And these are all things that are achievable. We have those proven solutions. And despite what the opposition says, this is really the best bet for our region to do something that no other region has done before. Thank you.
Thank you. Correct.
Yeah, I think we've already hammered on the non-accountability part of it, but let's talk a little bit more about the taxes. We say that it's going to hit only those high income earners and only those big businesses. Well, if you run a nonprofit, they have another name, those groups. They're also known as your donors. And there's some cautionary tales from the arts tax about this. One thing we learned from the arts tax is that it has really soured the relationship of donors to the arts organizations. They feel like they don't have to write a check anymore because they're already getting a steady stream of money. And they feel offended that they're asked for more money. There's another cautionary tale to us as voters about the arts tax. The tax we have today was changed by the city council, just like this tax can be changed by Metro Council. The tax that we have today is very different from the tax that was approved by voters, which is why it is easily the most hated tax in Portland and will soon be the second most hated tax in Portland. No one will deny the region has an overwhelming homelessness crisis. Even so, Measure 26210 is vague, it's half-baked, and has no clear plan and no way to measure success or failure. So please just
exercise Eric.
Skepticism.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Our time is up for today, but want to just express gratitude one more time for our speakers, Eric Fruits, Juan Carlos Gonzalez, and Jennifer Rollins for joining us today. Thanks to all of you for online, for joining us from home. Thank you again to our sponsors, The Standard and SEIU 49. And thank you to our media partners, KGW and X-Ray FM. In order for City Club to continue to provide quality, in-depth information to voters, especially in these surreal and scary times, we need your support. Make a donation today, whatever you can give. If everyone gave $5, we'd hit our goal. Just text support City Club, all one word, to 44321. Let's all work together to keep democracy moving forward. Also visit us online at pdxcityclub.org for in-depth election coverage and information on our upcoming virtual gala, May 14th at 6 p.m. Thank you all again. We are closed.